All right, well, I want to welcome everybody here to St. Athanasius Church, part of Our Lady Mount Carmel. Because we have a PowerPoint presentation tonight, I did take the Eucharist and reserve it in the chapel, so our Lord is not here in the Blessed Sacrament. But tonight's presentation is part of a three-part series in preparation for the consultation sessions, and it's so good to be with all of you. I know on behalf of Father John and all the clergy, I thank you for coming. This is also being live streamed right now, so some of you are watching at home. And also, this will be on the website, so maybe later on, somebody might be watching this video. We hope that you can watch all three videos just in preparation for the sessions. It'll make a lot more sense, and it'll help you to prepare for it. So tonight's talk is given by our very own John Flaherty. He is one of our parishioners, and he has quite the track record and quite the biography. He has a great passion for the Lord. It is so great to work with him. He's also our facilitator of our pastoral council, but he has a long history with the diocese and in this area too. So he began his career as a secondary school teacher of religion and English in Catholic high school. He worked for over 30 years at the Diocese of Pittsburgh in various positions related to pastoral planning. John, who holds a master's degree in systematic theology, has extensive experience in pastoral planning, organizational development, and leadership formation. He's published articles, led workshops, offered a wide range of presentations on church-related topics to audiences including bishops, priests, deacons, seminarians, Catholic educators, church ministers, and lay leaders. Most recently, until his retirement last year, he served as our pastoral associate for Our Lady Mount Carmel Parish, and where he and his wife are also members. John continues to provide planning and formation services to several parishes in our diocese as an independent consultant. And so I've had the honor to work with John closely on many different projects and ministries, and so it's an honor to invite him up. He will be giving, again, the background and then tonight's presentation. So let's give John a warm welcome. So. Thanks, Father.
Good evening. Thanks for coming out. This will be pretty informal given the size of the group. But my presentation has a certain formality to it. So we're here because Pope Francis called for the Synod to occur in October of 2023, and it actually began in October of 2021. And the topic is for a synodal church, communion, participation, and mission. So that's the broad context, and we're going to do two things. We're going to talk a little bit about what that means, a synod and a synodal church, and then in that context, we're going to talk about tonight's specific topic, which is praying our experiences. This is, again, as Father said, one of three parts. Last time we talked about what it means to be a pilgrim church. Tonight we'll talk about praying our experiences, and next week we'll talk about respectful conversations. So Father has already done the welcome. Again, our purpose here is twofold: to look at what the Synod is and what Pope Francis is inviting us into, and then to look specifically at prayer as part of our preparation for participation. So I'll have a presentation, and at different points I'm going to pause and ask for your input, and then at the end, if you have any questions in general, I'll be glad to do my best to answer those questions. So we want to begin with the opening prayer. This prayer is a very ancient prayer in the church. It was originally written by Saint Isidore of Seville, who was recently named a doctor of the church. It was used by the fathers of the Second Vatican Council in a slightly different form than this at the opening of every session of the Second Vatican Council. And so in preparation for this synod on synodality, this toward a synodal church, they took that prayer that the Second Vatican Council used and slightly revised it. Can everybody see that well enough that we can all pray together? So let's pray. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Together, we stand before you, Holy Spirit, as we gather together in your name, with you alone to guide us. Make yourself at home in our hearts. Teach us the way we must go and how we are to pursue it. We are weak and sinful. Do not let us promote disorder. Do not let ignorance lead us down the wrong path, nor partiality influence our actions. Let us find in you our unity, so that we may journey together to eternal life and not stray from the way of truth and what is right. All this we ask of you, who are at work in every place and time, in the communion of the Father and the Son, forever and ever. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. So this prayer is going to have some very important themes that we're going to talk about. One of them is journeying together. Again, Dr. Maureen Crossan last week delved into that more deeply. But tonight we're going to be focusing on the Spirit is at work in every place and time. That's what we're going to explore a little more fully tonight after the background and the orientation. So Pope Francis, on March 7th of 2020, announced that the topic of the 16th Ordinary Synod of Bishops would be Synodality. And the theme of the Synod is for a synodal church, communion, participation, and mission. So we've got these three words: synod, synodality, and synodal. Those are words that I would suspect are not familiar to most Catholics. We may have heard of the Synod of Bishops, but synodality, you're not going to find it in any dictionary. It's a word that Pope Francis has really brought forward. And synodal are terms that are a little less familiar to us. So before we get into praying as preparing us for this synodal church, we need to understand a little more richly, a little more detailed what that means. So let's talk about the Synod of Bishops. It was Pope Paul VI in 1965 who instituted it. That was at the end of the Second Vatican Council. What it is, it's an assembly of bishops represent all the Episcopal conferences in the world. So if you remember, the Second Vatican Council was called an ecumenical council. Now, we hear the word ecumenical, we think of that as, oh, that's our Christian brethren, the Presbyterians and the Lutherans. But ecumenical in the sense that it's used here means worldwide, universal. So at the Second Vatican Council, as an ecumenical council, every bishop in the world was present, or at least was invited. They couldn't be there for sickness or for some other. The Synod is different because it's not every bishop, it's every Episcopal conference. So, for example, the United States of America is an Episcopal conference. Canada is an Episcopal conference. One bishop or representative bishops of each of the Episcopal conferences gather at a synod. And it's held every 3 years. It's held in Rome during the month of October. It lasts about 3 weeks. And it explores either issues of doctrine or issues of church practice. Pope has a lot to say about it. So the Pope calls for, presides at, determines the program of, invites attendees to, and confirms the outcomes. The next Synod of Bishops will be the 16th Ordinary Synod, but there have also been 3 extraordinary synods, and there have been 11 special or regional synods. So these are the most recent general assemblies. So 2005 was on the Eucharist, 2008 was on the Word of God, 2012 was the new evangelization. Interestingly, 2015 was on the family. And I said there were 3 extraordinary general synods. One of the extraordinary general synods was in 2014 on the family. So there were actually 2 synods on the family, one in 2014 that was a extraordinary, and one in 2015 that was ordinary. And then the last one of the general ones in 2018 was on young people. You may have seen in the news that the most recent special synod was on the Amazon. It got a fair bit of coverage because there was conversation about ordaining married men to preside at the Eucharist. So synodality is about a church that listens. Pope Francis likes to say that the church not only teaches, the church also listens. And synodality is about the church listening. So synodality is a mode of living and operating the church as the pilgrim people of God. Again, that's why Dr. Crossan talked about that, because that's the basis. It's how we understand ourselves as church, as the pilgrim people of God. And that comes from the Second Vatican Council. The first of the three meetings, again, is the one that maybe people are familiar with, is it's a program events, such as the Triennial Synod of Bishops. It's going to happen in October of 2023 in Rome. So let's look a little bit at the Synod as an event. It has three components: preparation, celebration, and implementation. So we are in the current stages. Actually, 2 years of preparation is pretty long for a synod. Again, it kicked off in October of 2021, and it will go till September of 2023, that whole preparation. And there's three phases. So the first phase is the diocesan phase, which is the phase we're in right now. The second phase is what's called the continental phase, and then the last phase will be the gathering of the bishops in Rome. Interesting word, they use the word celebration. They don't use the word meeting. The gathering of the bishops is a celebration of what it means to be church. It's not a parliament. It's not a decision-making body per se. It's a celebration. It's a gathering of the bishops who are the successors of the apostles to celebrate the church as the pilgrim people of God, and the church as on a pilgrimage from here to the kingdom. And then lastly, implementation. So, for example, you may have seen one of the recent synods was on the Word of God. And out of that, Pope Francis issued a post-apostolic exhortation on the Word of God, and in that was an implementation piece. He asked that the third Sunday of every January be the Sunday of the Word of God, and that every church throughout the world do something to focus on the Word of God. Those who are familiar with church work, there's a thing called the pastoral circle, where you start with experience, you analyze it, you reflect on it, and then it takes you to action. And this is very similar to that. So the preparation is looking at our experience, analyzing it, reflecting on it. So that'll lead to some implementation. So the experience and the social analysis is what we're doing right now. That theological reflection is what will happen when the bishops gather in Rome in October of 2023. So there's a timeline here that was set forth. Again, I talked about the different phases. So there was a preparatory document that was issued in September of 2021, and then the local churches, that's the dioceses throughout the world, were supposed to begin in October with the first level of preparation, the first level of gathering experience and analyzing it. Originally, the Vatican said that phase was going to end in April of 2022. Well, the bishops of the world pushed back. They said, that's not enough time. There's no way, if we only get started here, that we can be done. So this has been revised from April to August of 2022. When that's all done, then the General Secretariat for the Synod in Rome will produce what's called a working document. This is Latin for a working document. That document then will go to the continental phase. So all of the continents will then take this document that's based on this consultation, and they'll have a second level of consultation. That will go until March, and then a final working document will be generated in June, and that will be the basis of what the discussion that happens with the bishops in October of 2023. So what we're doing now really is feeding into what the bishops will be talking about in October of 2023. So synod in its root meaning as it's been used, it's a meeting or it's an assembly of the church, and probably an assembly of the church is a better word. That's why the second, it's preparation, celebration. So meeting isn't even the best word. It's an assembly. It's the church gathered under the power and instigation of the Holy Spirit. It can be at various levels. So in 2000, the Diocese of Pittsburgh had a synod and generated a document that provided implementation for how that synod was going to be implemented. But literally, synod means journeying together. It comes from two Greek words. S-Y-N means together with. N-O-D means travel. So it's journeying, traveling together. And it's really this second meeting, journeying together, that invites us to consider the other aspects of synodality besides a meeting, besides an event. So let's look at those a little more carefully. So synodality can also, besides being an event, it can be a structure and a process. So Father mentioned that I work with the Pastoral Council for Our Lady of Mount Carmel. The Pastoral Council is an example of synodality. It's an example of a process that's how do we journey together as church? How do we live out what it means to be the pilgrim people of God? A consultation. Father said that on March 31st and April 7th, we will have 2 opportunities for consultation in our parish. That's an example of synodality at work. It's interesting to note that the English word council is taken from the Latin word. Synod comes from a Greek. The Latin translation of synod is concilium, which is council. So it's an event. We just talked about the event and all that's going to lead up to it, but it's also a structure and a process that's ongoing, that's not just time-bound. And thirdly, it's a style. And this really is where Pope Francis wants us to take. Remember, the title of it is Toward a Synodal Church. So when Pope Francis says toward a synodal church, he's not talking about toward more events. He's not necessarily even talking about toward new structures or processes, but he's talking about a new style of being church. And that style is marked by these characteristics. It begins in prayer, which is why we're going to talk about prayer tonight. It involves first and foremost listening that leads to dialogue that's marked with both boldness and humility. Out of that dialogue, there's analysis of what emerges from the dialogue, discernment, and then finally advising on pastoral decisions. So there's 3 important D's here. 2 important. There's dialogue and discernment. Decisions is the third. Dialogue, decisions. The 3 D's that are not here are discussion, debate, and diatribe, which so often in the church is what we experience. We experience discussion of ideas, we experience debate about those ideas, and occasionally somebody has a diatribe on those ideas. This is very different because it starts with prayer. So it really tries to root itself in how the Holy Spirit is making God's will known. It's listening deeply to our lived experience of God at work, and then dialoguing, and only then analyzing, discerning, and making decisions. So if you go to the synodal consultation, no discussion, no debate, and please, no diatribes. The overarching context, again, is that the church is the pilgrim people of God. So we're journeying together. We're journeying together on mission, a mission that's been given to us by Christ. We are formed as a pilgrim people by the Word of God. We're all called to holiness in that journey. We're all co-responsible for that journey. And there's lots of regional and local variety. This is what the preparatory document, which actually quotes Pope Francis from 2018, what the purpose of the Synod is. And it's very interesting to me. It says the purpose of the Synod is not to produce documents. Now, if you look at Synod as an event, guess what? That event can't happen without documents. We're going to have synodal consultations on March 31st and on April 7th, and Father Mike is going to get lots of documents from each of the small groups that he's going to have to synthesize. Then he's going to send that synthesis to the diocese, and then the diocese is going to take all of the consultations, literally dozens and dozens that are going to happen in the Diocese of Pittsburgh, and then they're going to synthesize that into a document that goes to the Episcopal Conference of Bishops of the United States, and they're going to get reports from all 167 dioceses. They're going to synthesize that. That's a lot of documents. But the purpose is not to produce documents. That's not why we're doing this. The purpose, as it says here, is to plant dreams, draw forth prophecies, allow hope to be nourished, inspire trust, bind up wounds, weave together relationships, awaken a new dawn of hope, learn from one another, and create a bright resourcefulness that enlightens minds, warms hearts, and gives strength to our hands. Now, as a main question that the Pope has asked us to look at, so it starts with a statement, a synodal church announcing the gospel, journeys together. Again, it's kind of what we used to call a tautology. So the word synod means to journey together, so it's a synodal church journeys together. So if we're going to be a synodal church, we're going to journey together. And then there's two questions. How is this journey together happening? So again, what's your experience of journeying together with the church? What has been the joy? What's been the disappointment? What's been the hope? What's been the pain in that? And then secondly, what steps does the Spirit invite us in to grow in our journey together? So these are the two questions that if you come to the Synod consultation on March 31st or April 7th, will be the first session to look at those two questions. And again, not to discuss or to debate, but to share our experience of that. Now that is broken down into three other sections. So again, it begins with experience. And again, this is going to be germane to when we talk about prayer. It's beginning with your experience. What has your experience been? Not your ideas, not your thoughts, not your arguments, your ideas. And then to look at those in depth. What are the joys, the difficulties, the wounds, and the insights? And then gather the fruit. What's the fruit of that sharing, of that entering into our lived experience? Where is the voice of the Spirit? What's the Spirit asking of us? What are the points to be confirmed or the prospects for change? Where do we register a consensus? Where do things begin to converge or emerge? And then what paths are opening up for us? Now, the Vatican also provides us with 10 themes, and there's a whole set of questions with the 10 themes. If you participate in the synodal session, you'll get all of this information in a participant guide. What I've done is I've taken those 10 themes and I've rearranged them. How arrogant of me, but I think if you look at those 10 themes, you'll see that they cluster around three categories. So 3 of the themes talk about the basis for synodality. Companions on the journey, sharing responsibility for our common mission, and authority and participation. And that's what Dr. Crossan talked about last week. What's the basis of synodality? We're companions. We all have responsibility. It's not just the priests, not the bishops. It's all of us have responsibility. And we all share in some way in authority, and all of us are called to participate. The second, which is what we're going to try to explore tonight, is the Spirit. And there are 3 themes that relate to that. It talks about celebration, which is about the Eucharist. Ecumenism, which is about our shared journey with our brothers and sisters in Christ. And then forming ourselves in synodality. Synodality is not something we're born with, it's something we learn, we have to grow into. And then next week, Lois Campbell will be here to talk about the practice. And there are 4 themes that talk about the practice: listening, speaking out, dialogue, and discerning and deciding. So to prepare for the consultation, that's why we're having these 3 sessions. Last week, we talked about the basis. Tonight, we'll talk about the Spirit. Next week, we'll talk about the practice. And all of that is to prepare you to engage fruitfully in the consultation on March 31st and April 7th. There are certain dispositions that are required. So, the expectation is you're participating in the life, you're listening to the Word of God, you're open to reason, you're attentive to church teaching, you're committed to holiness. And again, holiness is about belonging to God in Christ and His church. Holiness is that, it's not who you are, but whose you are. And then seeking to build up the body of Christ. So everyone coming to a synod consultation should have these 6 dispositions as the background for their participation. So all of that is by way of background. Let me just pause. Are there any questions about synod, synodality, or synodal? Anything that I said that wasn't clear? The event, the structure and process, and the style of being church. I'll try. Sure, sure. And again, my experience is sometimes when we get into debate and diatribe, it's often because one of these isn't present. One of these isn't present. So, praying our experiences, that's yes?
I heard you say no discussion, but then dialogue is mentioned in here. What's the difference between discussion and dialogue?
Very good question. That's a very good question. So, a discussion is where we're talking about concepts or ideas. Dialogue is where we're sharing our experience, and the goal of dialogue is that the other person understands what I'm trying to say. Discussion, often the goal there is to convince, persuade someone to your point of view. Dialogue is, I want to know what your experience is, and I want to be able to, can I really, somebody once told me that a lot of people listen with their answer running. Dialogue is about pure listening without your answer running. The goal of discussion is to come to some common agreement. The goal of dialogue is understanding. So the goals are very different. And for this to work, the goal has to be dialogue. Understanding, not agreement. Does that answer your question? Thanks for asking that. That's a great question. Should have thought to include that. So let's start with praying our experiences. What's that all about? And what I'm going to say here is taken from the Catechism of the Catholic Church. So this is not, my own personal opinion. This is the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Part 4 in the Catechism is on prayer. And what I'm going to share with you is taken from the Catechism. It says, God's Spirit is offered to us at all times in the events of each day. All times in the events of each day. God is not foreign. God is not abstract. God is not distant. God is near. And that is in the present we encounter God. Not yesterday, not tomorrow, today, right here, right now. God is seeking to make himself known. Prayer in the humble everyday situations of life is as important as prayer for justice and peace to influence the march of history. So all of us, I think, are concerned about what's happening in the Ukraine. And I'm sure we're praying for peace, for the resolution of this horrible conflict where so many people are at danger and have died because of this. And so we all know our call to prayer for justice and peace in the world. But the Catechism of the Catholic Church says that prayer in the humble everyday situation of life is as important. As important. Now again, so it's not either or. So I'm not saying you either pray for your everyday situations or, it's both and. But I think we often skip the first part. We often look at things outside of us that need prayer. Somebody has cancer, somebody lost a job, somebody has a serious illness. What about our own everyday experiences? So what are some of the beliefs? First one, God has a single loving plan which encompasses everything that exists or can exist. God has a single loving plan. I did a little research in terms of some of the facts. So, how old is the universe? Scientists tell us it's about 13.8 billion years old. God has had a single loving plan for 13.8 billion years. Whatever happened 13.8 billion years ago and whatever has happened since then is all part of God's single loving plan. How long have human beings been on the earth? Again, scientists tell us about 200,000 years. Homo sapiens, 200,000 years. And it's all part of God's single loving plan. And what is that single loving plan? God wants to be known by us. 13.8 billion years ago, before there was human life on earth, before the earth even existed, God had a single intention: to create creatures that could receive his love and could love him in return. God is beyond our grasp. the mystery is too great. I can't imagine that there's someone that could create a universe that is 23 trillion light years wide. It's beyond my imagination, beyond my thinking. But that mystery which I cannot grasp has grasped me for his single loving plan. And God is constantly trying to get our attention. We are very distracted, but he's relentless because he's single-minded in his loving plan. And so he communicates to us through our experiences. He's always knocking at the door, trying to get our attention. Nothing in our life is outside of the embrace of God. Both the beauty and the messiness of life is factored into God's single loving plan of drawing us near to him so that we can share in the beauty and the power and most especially the love of the Trinitarian life. So if that's the case, what does that say to us? Well, again, the Catechism of the Catholic Church talks about there are 3 well springs of prayer. You know what a wellspring is where things bubble up from. So obviously the Word of God is a wellspring of prayer. That's why we're encouraged to read the Bible as a routine part of our lives. The liturgy is the wellspring of prayer. All prayer comes from and draws us back to the liturgy, especially the Eucharistic liturgy. But also, this is the Catechism of the Catholic Church. This is not John Flaherty New Age. Catechism of the Catholic Church today is a wellspring of prayer. Why is it today a wellspring of prayer? Because God is always and everywhere seeking to make himself known. So let's look at praying our experiences. We can talk about that as a style. So there's a certain style of praying our experiences. And it's also an ascetical practice. So I want to look at both of those. First, I'm going to look at the style, and then we're going to look at the ascetical practice. And we'll see if this is going to work here. I've got a little clip from Fiddler on the Roof. How many people have seen Fiddler on the Roof? You good?
Dear God, was that necessary? Did you have to make him lame just before the Sabbath? That wasn't nice. It's enough you pick on me. Bless me with 5 daughters, a life of poverty. That's all right. But what have you got against my horse? Really, sometimes I think, when things are too quiet up there, you say to yourself, let's see, what kind of mischief can I play on my friend Tevye?
Aha! So you're finally here, my breadwinner.
I'll talk to you later.
So why you...
I'll talk to you later. So that's just a 1-minute clip from Fiddler on the Roof, and this kind of dialogue between Tevye and God happens throughout the movie. But just having seen that 1-minute clip, what strikes you about it? What strikes you about Tevye's relationship with God? Read it? It's a personal relationship, yeah. He talks to God like he would talk to one of his friends in the village. So it's personal. What else? What else strikes you? Yes? It's humorous. It's humorous, yeah. So, he's complaining, but he's complaining in a humorous way. Again, as you would in a personal relationship. What else strikes you about the characteristics of Tevye's prayer? It's honest. It's honest. Doesn't sugarcoat, doesn't, he's complaining about what happened to his horse. I mean, it's funny, he said, it's bad enough that you blessed me with 5 daughters and a life of poverty. So there was a sense of that although it's a personal relationship, and he could be very honest, there's a sense of that there's an otherness, that God is other than. He's not the same as his drinking buddies in the village. What else struck you? It was informal, yes. Right. It wasn't stylized, it wasn't ritualized, it was informal. It was Tevye talking to God the way Tevye talks. It's very much rooted in his personality and his own style. It's from the heart. It's from the heart, yeah. Again, this is not platitudes. This is not, real pious, devotional. This is from the heart, It's, again, if you continue in the scene, he has to get the milk delivered before sundown of the Sabbath, because in strict Judaism, you can't work from the time, but he has to deliver the milk to his customers. So, yeah, it was very. Anything else that strikes you about this clip? Yes?
I think it's recognizing God, because a lot of people haven't.
Yes. Right. So there was a recognition that what happens in his life is not just a series of accidents, that God is somehow at work. He may not understand why God did what he did to his horse, but he believes. So I would say in summary that Tevye understands that he's in a covenantal relationship with God. That God has said, Tevye, you will be my people and I will be your God. And I will be with you all times. And I will bless you. And he is able to have a personal, heartfelt, informal, from the heart conversation with God because he has deep and abiding trust. In what? That God has a single loving plan and that God cares deeply. He even cares about a horse's bad ankle. Why does he care about the horse's bad ankle? Because it affects Tevye, and he deeply loves Tevye. And Tevye has a sense of that, and he prays out of that. So when I talk about praying our experiences, I'm inviting us to have a style that Tevye had, to have that firm belief that God is in a covenantal relationship with us, that God is loving, faithful kindness, even in the messiness of life, even when a horse's ankle gets broken and may interfere with your ability to complete your job, or even when God blesses you with 5 daughters or a life of poverty. God's loving kindness, nothing is outside of God's loving kindness. And so there's nothing that I cannot bring to God in prayer. And sometimes, as it is with Tevye, he was just sharing. We think about the 4 traditional kinds of prayer: praise, thanksgiving, sorrow, and petition. He didn't do any of those formal 4. It was just a conversation out of his experience with someone that he has deep trust in a covenantal relationship. Does that make sense? Again, I think that 1-minute clip captures very much what we're talking about. So if part of the Synod is preparing with prayer, it's not just saying prayers, it's entering into that relationship and believing that God is trying to make himself known in my lived experience. He's trying to teach me something about his ways in my life and his relationship with me. And this praying our experience as a style that permeates our day, that can emerge at any time. Recently, I had an experience of flashes in my eye and floaters, and which that can be a sign of a detached retina. So I, went to my ophthalmologist, and then he told me to go to a retinal specialist. And of course, my luck, the retinal specialist was in Monroeville, not in the North Hills. So I, had to drive out to there, and I had a tear, but it wasn't attached, so they did laser surgery to repair the tear. But oh God, I shouldn't do this. As I was driving out there, I just was so overwhelmed by the goodness of God. I was driving on the Parkway, which I don't like to drive on, but I was thinking, I'm only able to get from my ophthalmologist's office in Wexford to Monroeville because Dwight D. Eisenhower decided that we needed to have an interstate structure, and that somebody figured out how to fabricate steel into rods to reinforce the concrete so it could bear the weight of all the traffic on the Parkway. And somebody made the concrete that I rode on, and the tires, and there were literally thousands of people that I was dependent on to get from Wexford to Monroeville, let alone who created the laser, who figured out this man, this doctor that did this procedure. Why did he feel called to be a doctor? Why did he get into retinal work? Why did he become why did he become a pediatrician? But he chose to do that, mastered the skill, and in 5 minutes, I had a surgical procedure that stopped a hemorrhage that could have damaged my retina. I was just overwhelmed, and all I could do is say, God, you are great. I mean, so many things I took for granted. And that trip, that 40-minute trip from Wexford to Monroeville, and then the trip home, just made me aware of all the ways that God was active. That the person who invented that laser had a gift from God. The person that fabricated that steel or made that concrete, they don't have a name in history, they're not famous, but they're all part of God's single loving plan. And they came together on that day for me to repair a torn a hemorrhage in my retina. That's what I mean about praying your experience. I prayed as I drove. Partly I prayed because the Parkway scares me, but I also prayed because I was just so acutely aware of the interconnectedness of everyone and everything, and that's only interconnected because of God's single loving plan. So that's the style. And I invite you to really consider to develop that style. Yes, our prayer cards and our prayer books, and my mother, God bless her, she uses Mother's Love from the Confraternity of Christian Mothers, and she's got these prayer cards she's 98. She's got these prayer cards that are so worn because she prays the prayers every night. And I'm not diminishing that, but I'm saying in addition to that, the style of Tevye, of praying our experiences, and doing that out of that deep sense that God is trying to make himself known. He's already near me, but he wants me to draw nearer to him. But then there's also, besides the style, there's the ascetical practice. We know what asceticism is, so Lent is where we think about asceticism. So what are the 3 typical asceticisms of Lent? Prayer, fasting, and almsgiving, right? So those are what are called ascetical practices. Asceticism basically is just a discipline. And so there's the discipline of the style, but then there's also the discipline of every day I'm going to take time out of my day to pray with my experiences. And St. Ignatius of Loyola has given us a particular way to do that in what he calls the examen. Many of us may be familiar with the examination of conscience, where we review our day, look at where we've sinned, and ask for forgiveness. And that examination of conscience is really a subset of Ignatius's examen. Ignatius's examen is about looking at our day and seeing what are the ways that God showed up. As I was driving on the Parkway, I was acutely aware of God's presence and his power and activity in my life. But there are many days I go through days that I'm not acutely aware, unless I pause and I review my day. So so it's like looking in the rearview mirror, looking back. There are 5 phases or elements of this. They all begin with R. So you begin by recollecting yourself, asking God's Spirit to illumine your mind and to show you how God was trying to make himself known in the course of your day. You then review your day, and this is where it's like the examination of conscience. Usually in the examination of conscience, you only review your day against some moral code. So you look at the 10 Commandments, and you look at your behavior in terms of where it deviated. But St. Ignatius says, no, review your day and just allow what naturally emerges as you look back over this day. What comes to mind? What stirs in your heart? It may be a sin, but it may be something much more benign or something good. And then recognize how God was present in that moment, in that event, in that person, in that experience. And then respond to God. Have a conversation, a Tevye-like conversation with God about that. Thanks for being there through Mary, or thanks for that email that I got, or thanks for allowing me to get that project done because it's been weighing on me, or just thank you for the love of my spouse. And then resolve, again, we all know the day-by-day prayer, the prayer from St. Richard's to see God more clearly and to love God more dearly and to follow him more nearly day by day. So this is a way, in a structured way, that you do every day to pray with your experiences. So the substance of this prayer is not a prayer book or the Bible or even the liturgy. It's your day-to-day life, because it goes back to what we said. What are the well springs of prayer? The Word of God, the liturgy, and today. This is a tool for helping you plumb the depths of today, because in that today, God showed up, God made himself known, God sought to draw you nearer to his Trinitarian life. So I'm going to end with what I'm going to call 7 Beatitudes. Just a little quote from Chesterton. I love this quote. Just going to church doesn't make you a Christian any more than standing in your garage makes you a car. I think that's a great, G.K. Chesterton, a great British writer. So again, it's not just a matter of going to church, it's the quality of that relationship. It's from the heart, it's that informal, it's praying our experiences. So these are 4 B things I would suggest to you to implement what we're talking about tonight. First is be trusting. Trust God. God does not deceive. God loves you, and he wants you to know that love, and he wants you to be drawn intimately into that love. Trust God. Be trusting of God and his work, even in the messiness, the sorrows, the confusion, the heartbreak of life. Secondly, be desirous. To be desirous. To desire God. Say, God, I know you want me. Help me to want you. There's a great prayer by Thomas Merton, who's a great spiritual writer of the 20th century, where he says, God, I don't know if I'm following your will, but I believe that my desire to follow your will is pleasing to you. So be desirous. Cultivate the desire for God. Be receptive. Be receptive. So often, God doesn't show up, not because God didn't do his part, it's because we weren't receptive to him. Sometimes we put parameters around God. This is the God that created the universe 13.8 billion years ago, a universe that's 23 trillion light years wide. He knows what he's about. But we need to be receptive to him, and we need to not block the mysterious ways he may show up in our lives. They talk about Jesus in disguise. Sometimes Jesus shows up in disguise. He shows up in the homeless or the poor or the abandoned. To be receptive, to be attentive, pay attention to your life. Pay attention to it in a third way, to see beyond just the event or the person or whatever it is that's right in front of you, but what's behind it, the deeper significance, to really be attentive that God is trying to make himself known. Be still. Sometimes we can't really be attentive until we're still. That's where the examine comes in handy. Oftentimes that's one of the biggest challenges, is to find time to be still in our lives, to really pray our experiences. Be consistent. I talked about praying our experiences as an ascetical practice. Ascetical practices are practices that we perfect over time because we do them again and again and again. When I was a small boy, my parents taught me the morning offering. And you prayed it every morning, the morning offering. Again, that consistency of every day. And the same thing with praying your experiences. You need to be consistent. You just can't jump in and out of it. Or when things are tough, then you're going to pray your experiences. It needs to be a consistent part of your life. And then lastly, be generous. God is not to be outbeaten in generosity. And so we need, as being images of God, to also seek to be generous. Generous in allowing God to touch us, to shape us, to form us, to call us out in ways that we may not want to because they're uncomfortable or they're embarrassing or they don't fit our predetermined definition of what God is or what he wants. So those are some beatitudes that help to foster both the style and the practice of praying your experiences as a reflection that God shows up today. So, again, the context of this is the Synod. Now, we're talking this second session here about praying our experiences as preparation for engaging in the Synod consultation. And you might say, well, that was interesting and that was nice, but so what? So what? Why is this even important? Well, Pope Francis suggests to us that the path of synodality is the way we're going to know God's will and to follow it. And it's got to be grounded in the living voice of the people of God. So if you and I aren't paying attention to our experiences as the place where God makes himself known, how are we ever as church going to know what God wants us? We're on a pilgrimage. We need to know where the pilgrimage is, and we need to put our feet next in that journey. And we're only going to know that if we're listening to the living voice of the people of God as a reflection of God's will. And Pope Francis believes that the path of synodality, the path of this prayer, listening, dialogue, is the path that the church is expected of the church in the third millennium. Now, I think it's interesting, the Pope said the third millennium. A millennium's 1,000 years. This ain't going to happen overnight. This is going to, what's going to happen on March 31st and April 7th is just an itsy-bitsy tiny step towards moving in that direction. So why is it important? Because we're going to find the will of God and the living voice of the people, and that's the path forward for the church. Why is it important to me? So maybe that's why it's important, but why is it important to me? Well, one of the things is to be in communion with the Church Universal. I mean, I'm sad to say, there are some dioceses that aren't doing anything for the Synod. I find that greatly disheartening. They're not in communion with the Church Universal. And what we talked about, those 6 dispositions, what was the first disposition? Participation in the life of the church. Why else is it important? It's to learn and maybe even to experience a conversion by listening to others. One of my favorite quotes is from a social worker named Brene Brown, who says, "Everybody has a story that'll break your heart." If we really listened to people's experience, it would transform us. If we really dialogued in the sense of trying to understand and not persuade, we would be converted. Because in the other, and in coming to know the other, we come to know the other, the mysterious other, the source of all life, what we call God. And then finally, why is it important to me? To support my fellow pilgrims. Nobody goes on this journey alone. Again, the insight that I had in driving from Wexford to Monroeville for my eye was, I can only do this because of thousands of people that went before me. Thousands who invented all of the things, the parts of my car and the road and the instruments. That wouldn't have happened But without that rich interconnectedness, don't I owe my fellow pilgrims support to share their joys and hopes, their griefs and anxieties? So it's St. Patrick's Day, so we have to end with an appropriate prayer. But are you familiar with this prayer? A lot of people are familiar with the prayer. This is only a portion of St. Patrick's breastplate. It's probably the portion that is most well known. But if you look at that, what is St. Patrick saying to us? With me, before me, behind me, in me, beneath me, above me, on my right, on my left, when I lie down. What? In my everyday experience. Not yesterday, not tomorrow. Not some far off, unattainable realm of spirituality. Today, Christ is there. So I invite us to say this prayer, and then I'll open it up to any questions we may have. How about we stand up, because you've been sitting for a long time. Everybody read this. Is it clear enough? In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Together. Christ with me, Christ before me, Christ behind me, Christ in me, Christ beneath me, Christ above me, Christ on my right, Christ on my left, Christ when I lie down, Christ when I sit down, Christ when I arise, Christ in the heart of every man who thinks of me, Christ in the mouth of everyone who speaks of me, Christ in every eye that sees me, Christ in every ear that hears me. Amen. So, we'll have a chance for questions or comments, any observations, and then we'll have our adjournment. So you can sit down again. Any questions, anything that struck you in what I shared, any observations, anything that made sense, anything that was questionable?
How is the bishop chosen as one to represent the people of the synod?
Yeah, so each Episcopal conference, usually the president of the conference, so the bishops of the United States elect a president, so it's usually the president and then one or two others who are chosen by the bishops. How many bishops from each conference go depending on how many bishops? Some Episcopal conferences are very small. We have a really large one in the United States, so we tend to send 2 or 3 representatives to the synod. So it would be the president of the Episcopal Conference and then 1 or 2 others that are selected by the other bishops. Jim? Oh, thank you. Yeah, so that's a great question. So a couple things I think are background to this. Number one, remember, he is the first Jesuit to be pope. And a lot of what this is very much Ignatian spirituality. So part of it is given his Jesuit training, bringing the insights of Ignatius. And, you know, if you know anything about Ignatius, Ignatius's conversion was rooted in his experience. And his experience wasn't always pretty. His experience of conversion began when his leg was damaged by a cannonball. And he had several painful surgeries because he was such a proud man, he didn't want his leg to look crooked. But in the process of recuperating from that, he was transformed. And he kept going back to, what was my experience, and how do I know when God is showing up and when it isn't? He calls it discernment of spirits. So part of it is Pope Francis's Jesuit upbringing. And it's always an interesting question to ask is, what in your life has been your cannonball experience? When did a cannonball strike you and knock you off your path you were on because God wanted you to draw near to him? But that's another. The second thing is, again, he was a bishop, and he participated in some of those synods. So again, the synod started in 1965. Pope Paul VI began it. And he would go to these things, and he said, they're awful. He said, because first off, it's just bishops talking to bishops. There's no, so the Synod on young people, there were young people in the room. For many years there was no women. It's all men, all clerics. And the other thing is when they got there, it was just a series of speeches. So it was, I think you have 3 minutes to give a speech. So one bishop would give a speech for 3 minutes. There was no dialogue. And he saw that as not only deadly, but given his Jesuit upbringing, he knew that was not life-giving. That was not going to lead us to know how the Spirit is drawing. So he wants to change the event of the Synod of Bishops, and he wants to change it in a way that we as church start living and behaving in a different way. He keeps saying that a synod is not a parliament, and it is not a debate team. And I'll be honest with you, Father said, I worked for 30 years for the Diocese of Pittsburgh. I did a lot of planning process. I was with a lot of groups, and I have to say, it often wasn't Spirit-led. It was often, when I first started, here's a likable job. I was hired to merge parish schools, right? One of my favorite lines was I was working with these 3 parishes that all had to school. The population was declining, they had to merge, and this woman at the meeting said, "It's a good idea and I don't like it." She was very honest. She said, "It's a good idea to merge schools and I don't like it." And so it was often a matter of debate and power, and wasn't of the Spirit. It wasn't discerning the living voice of the Spirit and how we're being called to move forward in fidelity to the mission for which we're all co-responsible. That was a great observation, great question. Anyone else? Oh, yeah. Yeah, again, if you follow what Pope Francis says, the church needs to go to the margins. So, unfortunately, part of its time, some of the people on the margins don't trust the institutional church. I mean, part of the crisis that we're in is a crisis of trust. That, institutions in general, but the church in particular, isn't trusted. So when the institution says, "Come, we want to hear your experience," the thought is, yeah, right. So, but you're absolutely right, and the Pope has been adamant about this, that, the consultation needs to reach out to the young people that don't go to church, to the separated and divorced who feel alienated, to the gay community that, feels that they get mixed messages from the church. Reaching out to all of those people and really listening to them, because it's transformative for them and it's transformative for the insiders as well. But that's one of the big challenges. How do we get to those audiences? Yeah. Somebody else had their hand up.
Having begun this process of involving the laity, listening to the laity, reaching out to marginalized people, listening to them, bringing this all together, what mechanism is there going to be for feedback to those of us who participate in this? How are we going to keep up with what is going on, what is happening, what the outcome is?
All right, well, and Father Zavich can speak to that. One of the things I'm proudest of at Our Lady of Mount Carmel is that they're not treating the synod as one and done. So you can approach this and say, okay, we're going to have our consultations, we're going to write our report, and then we're going to move on to our ordinary life. But the Pope is saying he wants this to become a style. So the evangelization team under Father Zavich is saying, how do we continue this dialogue? How do we loop back what we learned? How do we invite more and more people into this conversation? How do we listen to a broader array of experiences? So one of the things I'm proud of here is that there are people like Jim and like Father and Rita and Janet who are asking that question. Let's look beyond April 7th. So, one of the things, I don't know whether you plan to do this, but one of the things is that the report that's sent to the diocese should be made available to the parish. So we should put it on the website and so that people know this is what we heard and this is what we told the bishop we heard at Our Lady of Mount Carmel. But besides that, we want to continue the conversation. We want to extend the conversation so that we have more voices, more vibrancy, more richness of experience to see how we're being called forward.
Well, it seems to me the only way that can happen is if we get feedback from not only Bishop Zubin, but all the bishops and Pope himself. There's got to be a feedback mechanism.
That's a really good point, and thanks for raising that, because, again, it's all of the voices. So it's the voice of this parish, it's the voice of all 80-some parishes in the Diocese of Pittsburgh, it's the voice of all 167 dioceses in the United States, it's the voice of the world. And so we have to hear all those voices if we're going to really know how the Spirit is leading us into the future. And you raise a very good point that if all of this just goes to some office in Rome, it's not going to have the transformative power that it's intended to have. So we probably should look into that, ask the bishop, will the diocese provide a report? Will the bishops' conference make public the report it submits? That's a very, very valid suggestion. Well, yeah, but the first step in the loop is report and then continuing the dialogue. Any other comments or observations? Well, thanks very much for your kind attention. Father has some closing remarks.
So let's give John a round of applause. Again, thanks to John. So a couple things that's very important is that as he expressed today, this is prayerfully going through your everyday life and sharing. And so those two consultation sessions is about small groups. We're going to divide people up, and everyone's going to be able to answer those questions of God journeying. What does it mean to journey together? Everyone's going to have a different response, and everyone has a story to tell. So this isn't like, it's not a diatribe. It's not anything. We're not yelling at each other or debating anything. But I would like, I'm excited to hear everyone's story. You get to hear my story because I preach it on Sunday, but you have a story to tell too. And so everyone who's attended this in person, everyone who's attending this live streamed or watching this on YouTube or our main page, this understanding of sign up for these consultation sessions and also bring a friend. Bring someone else, but now you know the context. You know, someone who loves the Lord, someone who's praying, someone who is able to reflect on their lives daily and say, oh yeah, this is how God's working in my life. And again, we need everyone, and so I need your help too. Down front here, if you haven't signed up for one of the 2 consultation sessions, I ask you to do so. Again, it's on Thursdays. The first one is March 31st, and then the other one is Thursday, April 7th. It's at 7 p.m. It goes till 9 p.m. We're going to have facilitators. We're going to take care of everything. Rita has that down front to sign up for one of those dates. Again, they're both the same session, but we want to give you some options. And if you're watching it on live stream or on Facebook, you can go straight to our website, which is www.mountcarmelpgh.org. And on the Facebook, you can either /Synod or you could just click on the link there. So, but again, register to sign up a friend, someone else you know. Again, we're trying to get the word out, but because Synod is a word that we don't use often, we need your help. Because now that you've been into some of these preparatory sessions, now you kind of understand what the Pope is asking of us. I need your help as well. So please do that because we all want to journey together. We all want to share that story, and everyone has a story to tell. Where we go from there, I think you've asked some great questions. You know, this is only the beginning of a process, like of coming to know people, knowing the needs of our community. And this is what the Pastoral Council is looking at. Where are we headed as a church here in the North Hills? How are we going to meet the needs of the people? What are the needs of the people? You know, how have people journeyed together? And how do we reach the fringes? And so this is like step 1 of a very long process of getting to know God in our area, what he's doing in our lives, and how to reach everyone with the good news. So this is just one of many. So again, you probably have lots of questions how this affects the universal church, but I know that this on a local level is just one of many ways that we're growing together. So I thank you for participating. Thank you for being here tonight. Hopefully you can watch all 3 sessions, preparatory sessions leading up to the consultation, sign up a friend, and again, I think I'm very blessed to have all of this taking place in our parish. I think we're doing a great job of promoting and getting out there just to know what it is. Because again, for us to be church, we need to walk together, and we all have a story to tell. So I hope to see you both on one of those sessions, and we have one last session, preparatory session, next Thursday, and again, that's with Lois Campbell. So with that, I'll give you a little blessing. The Lord be with you. And may Almighty God bless you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you so much. God bless. Have a great night, and we'll see you soon.